What up, players? It's Warboss Tay up in this mug. This is a Deathshroud Terminator for the Death Guard Legion, Warhammer 30k Horus Heresy. Before they were big, stinky, chunky boys, they were loyal sons of the Imperium fighting the good fight across the galaxy. And that's what I want to paint up for you today. So it's some Forge World miniatures, that amazing Forge World resin. I got these from Binx Wargaming. I'll link him below in the description. And this was part of a huge Death Guard lot that I'm churning my way through, trying to paint and get up to sell on eBay as quickly as possible. But this is just the Deathshroud Terminators. I absolutely love how they came out. This is the standard I'm going to be giving you. Today, we're going to go right up to the point where we're going to start giving them the really dirty enamel washes and mucking them up and just giving them that great oily, streaky grime, which we're going to clean up in the next phase using villainy inks. But this is the miniature we're going to be working on today. As you can see, they're already assembled. That's one of the services Binx Wargaming offers. For a nominal fee, he will assemble your miniatures, which is great for me because I'm getting old. I'm getting along in the years, and so I don't trust my big fat sausage fingers to be assembling fine Forge World resin anymore. Now, the first thing I did was the miniatures came primed and they came on the cork base already, so I just went with my Rakarth flesh and did a heavy dry brush over the miniature. Then you can see I'm opening up my Wraithbone paint in the wonderfully designed paint pots by Games Workshop, and I just can't believe the quality is so poor in these paints. I literally opened this a couple of weeks ago, this Wraithbone paint, and now it's getting all dry and crusted, and it's probably not going to be usable for much longer. This is an Army Painter wet palette. I'm a huge fan of using a wet palette, not painting straight out of the pot, especially in a terrible pot like Games Workshop where the paint is already drying on the inside. So basically with that wet palette, you've lined the bottom with water, you put one of their sponges on top, and then a parchment paper. They come with 50 parchment papers, something like that, some great amount. And then you put your paint on the parchment paper, and then it's able to be usable for hours. It's amazing. Whereas if you try to put this on just a dry surface, like a plate or the inside of a plastic clamshell, the paint will dry up within seconds. So wet palette, highly desirable, great product to use. I'm going to link it below in the description, and you can check it out on Amazon. So got a big brush. I'm just doing a heavy highlight, chunky highlight on the entire miniature. Now I would have normally painted all of the base coats and then gone back and done a selective highlight, but you know what? This is just going to be faster for us. This is going to take us less time to do the ivory bone colored armor. Just do a heavy dry brush, get it all done, and then go back and pick out all of the individual details. Now, I know it's a small nitty-gritty thing, but one of my tips and tricks is that I try to keep a consistent brushstroke. I'm going from a vertical brushstroke right now, and that always is the way that I like to do it. It kind of shows the vertical lines, even if they're at a slight diagonal, rather than mixing it up and doing horizontal, vertical, diagonal. Now you can see there, that's called a acrylic paint craft paint. So you can get that at Walmart, Target, any big box store. That little tube is only $3, something like $3 or $4, and that's going to last me for many years because of how much paint there is. Now I'm using the black paint here. The only area that I think has black paint is the shaft of the sickle, as well as the inside of his eye lenses for his helmet. And the reason why I love that craft paint so much is because for the amount you're spending, only a couple of bucks, you're going to get this huge tube of paint that looks identical to Abaddon black paint. It looks identical to any black paint on the market because black is always going to be approximately the same color. If it's a true black, then you're not going to be able to tell the difference between an Abaddon black or like the old Chaos Black from the old range, or any black from Vallejo or any other company. If it's just a straight black, then you can save yourself so much money in the long run by buying only a tube of craft paint. So there's a little money saving tip for you there. Now what I'm going to be doing is painting olive green or olive drab for the shoulder pads. Now I don't want to paint this. I actually think this is supposed to be Castellan green, but I couldn't find my Castellan green in my paints, and I was looking for the closest approximate color I had, and it was this olive drab color. So from Vallejo, very, very approximate, very close, and you're only going to be using it on the shoulder pads. I think it was about this time when I was painting the miniature when I really got into the flow state of painting the other miniatures, and finding that flow state when you're painting, it's such a great feeling, because it really helps you to push through any mental blocks or resistances. If you're feeling tired, if you feel like resentment to painting and you don't really want to sit down in your chair and work, getting into the flow state, plugging into the mindset of just churning out this paint job so that you get it done. It's kind of like how I tell my son is at the age right now, he's like 3 years old, where he doesn't want to brush his teeth every night, and he just hates it, and he'll avoid it, and he'll protest, and he'll do everything to not brush his teeth. But I keep telling him, like, just get it done, just do it, don't even think about it, and before you know it, you'll be done. And all this time you were complaining, you could have just done it, and then you would be free and clear now to just do something else. So it's just, our mind is so focused on the act and sitting down and painting and putting base coats on things. Especially base coats are so unrewarding because you don't really feel like you've done much by the end of it. But let me tell you, once you are actually sitting down and working, and you get your mind into the flow state where you're not consciously stressing out over every single brushstroke, you're just letting the paint flow. It's almost like I don't know, like some real Shaolin monk kind of mental mastery, where I was almost like out of my chair observing myself. Of course, it helps if you have some good music on, or a podcast, or an audiobook you can listen to. All right, Runelord Brass is a beautiful, beautiful brass color that you can use to paint all of the accents on any Death Guard model. And right now, I'm going to tell you, for 30K, for 40K, putting these brass accents on your miniatures is really just a game changer, because you're used to looking at all of this white, all of this bone color, and then you've got that green color suddenly, and now you're looking at a miniature with a little bit more color. Once you add the brass accents and the metals, it really changes the look of the model and makes it feel more complete and more finished. Another thing I like about Runelord Brass is that it's a great color to paint on. The coverage is really nice, it's smooth, it doesn't get thick and clumpy, and you can apply it really evenly over your miniature. So I'm showing you right now, after looking at the Games Workshop pictures for what a Deathshroud Terminator looks like all painted up, I think I found just about all of the brass accents on the miniature. And the major ones you want to focus on are the big rivets that are on the leg armor, and a couple of the shoulder armors too. I think just one of the shoulder pads actually has big round rivets pounded into them. There's also some trim on most of the larger armor pieces. You can see it looks like a border on like the tabard armor, on the top of the leg armors, on the knees, as well as on the shoulder pads. Also on the miniature, you've got these round discs that look like dinner plates with a pork bun in the middle, or like a little ball, right? So that whole thing gets painted in Runelord Brass, and then you're going to come back after the next step once that has been dried, and then you're going to paint the interior, like the little ball in the center of those dinner plates. You're going to paint that in Lead Belcher. You also are going to be painting in Runelord Brass. Like you can see right there, the scythe has at the bottom the little cap, as well as on the handle going up to the blade. Now the blade itself is going to be silver, as well as the little tubing, little piping on it, but most of it is going to be Runelord Brass, which contrasts really nicely with the silver as well as the black. Alright, there you can see I'm painting the trim of the shoulder pads. You might have also seen I left the skull design on the left shoulder pad because that's the Death Guard symbol. I left the skull in Wraithbone as much as I could. If you get a little bit of that green paint, that olive drab onto the skull, that's fine. You want to try not to as much as possible though. In fact, with everything, I want you to work this into your mind, get this this idea, this concept, that if you make a mistake, it's okay. You can always paint over your mistakes. If that's the thing that keeps you from painting something, if you're looking at a model that's like half base coated and you're thinking like, I don't want to mess up by adding a color and having it bleed over onto another part of the model, don't worry about that. Don't think about that. Okay, you can see in the back here, there's also like a little canister on the back armor that's also in brass. And then you've got the trim on the butt plate. You've also got these little like staples that are holding together some of the armor pieces. Now, I'm not sure if those are all brass, but I decided that I wanted to paint them brass because silver doesn't show up as well, as nicely on this bone armor. The brass gold really does though. That's why we're going to be painting all the boats on the tabard armor, on the little butt plates, and then you can see right at the bottom of the leg where the foot goes into the center of the front of the armor there's a couple of bolts over like the little plates, so those are going to be painted as well. You can also see the round dinner plate looking parts of the armor. You could see them on the knees, right there on the chest, and then two at the elbows. So those are where you're going to be painting that Runelord Brass, and then once it's dry, go back in the center with lead belcher. There's a grill right on the chest plate that has Runelord Brass as well. And if you can reach it, on the sides of the helmet, there are two little bolts that are holding the helmet in place. Those are going to be Runelord Brass, if you can reach it. And then the tubing that goes from kind of like from the ear part towards the mouth, that is going to be painted in lead belcher. Now, I said if you can reach it because some of these, the heads are angled a certain way. They're pretty set deep into the armor. I think this is like based on Cataphracti armor. It's just a different Death Guard version of it. So the heads are set kind of low and far back into the hoods of the armor. So if you can't reach it, it's totally fine. I believe now I am painting with lead belcher, and lead belcher is a tricky paint to work with. Once it starts drying, it has different qualities and properties to the makeup of the paint than like Runelord Brass. So you always want to shake your paints. You want to turn them upside down so that they settle on the lid. So when you open the lid, you don't have to worry about dipping your paintbrush deep into the pot. And with lead belcher, what I've noticed is that if you work straight from the pot, it is one of the worst paints to use straight from the pot. It goes on very thick and clumpy. So what you want to do is use, like, either dip your brush into the paint and then immediately just kiss the top of the paint water with your brush so that your brush tip gets a little bit of water with that lead belcher. And then as soon as you mix it by painting it onto whatever you're working on, say the blade of the scythe or all of these little wires, then that water and that paint is going to spread out, and then you can mix it up on the model as you're working. Now, if that's too wild of a concept for you, just use your wet palette. Slap on a big glob of lead belcher paint, then pick up some water with your brush and then just mix it on your wet palette. Then it'll flow really nice and easily. The reason why you want it to flow is because so much of what you're painting right now with this lead belcher paint is that ribbed piping, and there is a lot on the back, as well as like connecting the back armor to the power fists, and then the little bits that you find on the scythe. There's just a lot of these things, and you're going to be painting them in lead belcher, so you want to make sure that the paint doesn't obscure the details. That's the term I'm looking for, and go on too thick, and you want it to flow into all of the little cracks and recesses and really accentuate and pop out the detail that the sculptors and the designers really put so much effort into. Lead belcher, like I said, is going to go all the way around with all the piping. You're also going to be seeing on the back of the miniature, right at the waist, there's a little bit of exposed piping and metal, so I painted all of that lead belcher if I could get into it. There's piping here that comes through the front and meets over the chest plate with a little grill that you already painted in Runelord brass. Just the center of that grill is going to be painted in lead belcher. Lead belcher is also the color for any joints in the armor, like where the leg armor meets the groin, where the back of the knees are, the elbows, anywhere where you see that ribbed joint armor, that's going to be lead belcher. And now you can see I'm painting the little pork bun in the dinner plates, just taking that lead belcher. Now the great thing about working on a squad of these guys is that you are guaranteed that your first miniature, when you come back to the end of the line and you're going back to the first miniature, there's no way any of this paint will still be wet. So what I'm doing right now, going color to color on a single miniature, I usually don't recommend. If you're working on a squad of these guys, do every single one in the color you're working on, in the step that you're working on. Then move back to the first one once you hit the end of the line, get on to the next step, the next color. The way that I'm doing it right now is you could tell by the length of the video how long it's going to take to just get to the washes and the enamel section with just one miniature. I don't want you to get disheartened. I don't want you to get discouraged. So when you finish each step, I suggest you move on. Also, it looks great too when you've got an entire squad of miniatures at the same level in front of you. It really looks great. Looks a lot better than getting one miniature up to a certain point, and then you feel all satisfied, you put it down, and you see the rest of the miniatures like, okay, my turn next. Let's go, let's move it up, let's move it on. Okay, I'm going to be taking my black paint now and just filling out the detail on the Death Guard icon on the shoulder. The great thing about this is because it's designed onto the plate, it's sticking out, it's raised up, you can follow it with your paintbrush and water down that paint a little bit so that you're really going to be letting the paint flow and cover really nicely and easily. At this point in the process, what I'm going to be doing is using some Villainy ink enamels to really weather my miniatures. And so I want to do that with the designs and the transfers already on the miniature. That's why I'm going to be taking this step now, using some microsol and microset to put the transfers onto the miniatures. The only transfers I could see that for sure definitely went on the miniatures are the crossed sickles for the right shoulder pads. So that's what I'm going to be adding. Now, I saw that there were some leg armor pieces that have some nice wide surface areas, perfect for a transfer, but there's not much guidance by Games Workshop what they put there. So I looked at the Death Guard transfer sheet for the Death Guard Legion from Forge World, and I just chose a couple of pieces that I think are going to show up well on the leg armor plate, and that's what I'm going to be putting on. Now, if you haven't seen my how to apply waterslide decals before, it's very simple. Your best friend is this microset and microsol products. So you take some microset, you paint it onto the area that's going to be used, and then you cut your transfer out of the transfer sheet with a hobby knife, take your tweezers, and you dip it into the microset so that it works and lifts the transfer paper off of the backing paper. And you just take your paintbrush, and while you're holding that transfer paper with your tweezers, you're going to be brushing the decal, the transfer, onto your miniature. It's going to take a while with microset, even with microset on this Forge World transfer because for some reason they use a transfer paper that takes a long time to lift off of the backing paper when you compare it to other Games Workshop transfers, like their Chaos Space Marines, their Space Marines, their Astra Militarum transfers. You just use some water. You could dip it in water, and in a couple of seconds, it's going to lift up off the paper, and you can paint it straight on. But with Forge World, for some reason, their transfer paper takes a lot longer. So what I've started to do is cut out the transfers, dip them into the microset, and then just put them on the cap right there of my microset and let it do its magic and let it work while I move on to the next one. It's a great little step. What you want to make sure you don't do though is bite off more than you can chew. Like, don't dip all of them into the microset, because if something happens, like if your baby starts crying and your wife starts screaming at you to stop painting and help, then you're going to be leaving those transfer papers and they're going to be lifting off of the backing paper, but without being painted onto a model. It's going to cause you a lot of trouble because it's going to dry right back onto that backing paper, making it much more difficult to use as intended. Later on, you're going to have to come back and dip it back into some microset again and get it soft enough so that it's going to lift, and who knows by then how much of the sticky property is there to get onto where you need to go. Once your transfers are on your miniatures, you're going to be letting it dry overnight, then come back with some microsol, and you're going to paint the microsol onto the transfer paper. And each product, microset and microsol, have a specific job to do to get your transfers to look like they're naturally modeled onto the miniature, rather than being painted, or rather than being put on the product where you could see the plastic film of the transfer paper as it dries. What microset does is it softens the transfer paper so that it adheres to a surface even if it's curved, and it creates the ability for you to also move it around to set it where you want to set. So the microset does. After you put it onto the miniature, you can take like a hobby knife or even your paintbrush and you can move it around. Just dip your paintbrush into some more microset and get it nice and moist and soggy. Then you can take your hobby knife and move it around, because that microset is going to keep it from sticking to the surface of your miniature. Once your transfer paper is dried, your miniature is dried, you left it overnight, the microset dissolves, then the transfer is going to hopefully have adhered to all the curves of the surface that it's on, but it's still going to look like a transfer. Like, it's still going to be shiny and glossy, and it's not going to look like it was painted or burned on. That's where the microsol comes in. It dissolves the backing paper into the miniature, kind of gets rid of the look of it being a separate product. It's still going to be a little bit glossy, which is why you're going to have to come back with some matte varnish later and just dull it down. Or in my case, since I'm putting all of the transfers on right now before the inks and the enamels, it's going to just help a lot, because the entire surface of the transfer is going to be darkened down and have a cohesive color with the enamel inks. This is as far as we're going to get with the Death Guard Deathshroud for this video. I wanted to get all of my squad painted up to this level before we move on, and I'm so glad that I was able to. Thank you for joining me and checking this out. We're going to be doing the April Mania Brush Tay Painting Challenge starting in April 1st. If you want to join up, get some miniatures painted. This challenge, we're going to be focused not so much on setting a goal and achieving it, although that is kind of like the secondary mission. Dig into your pile of potential, cut it down, and get some models painted. That's definitely what we want. But first and foremost, my objective in bringing forward this challenge at this time is that you build up the habit of painting and sitting in your chair and painting. I'll be describing that more as we go along, but I just want to thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and if you'd like to support me, you can buy me a coffee, or you can support me on Patreon for a little bit more of a substantive return. I'm going to be actually giving out to all of my patrons the ebooks of everything that I've published so far. So if you're a supporter on Patreon, just let me know which format you want me to send you your ebooks in, either Apple iBooks format, EPUB, or Mobi. For if you have a Kindle, just let me know and I will send you those videos. So thank you for supporting me on Patreon. And like I said, if you'd like to support me as a one-time thing, you can buy me a cup of coffee. It's always appreciated. Could always use more coffee. I could put my coffee link in the description. And of course, head on over to the Discord if you're not there already, so you can take part in all the madness of the April Painting Challenge. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next video. Latest, players!